In the last video, we looked at two different ways to declare a value of type person. So we first off used person, the curly braces, and then we listed out just the values that we wanted to put into the struct. The issue with that approach is that it depends entirely on the order in which we list out the different fields that this person has. So a much more foolproof way of doing it is to list out the property name, a colon, and then the value that we want to assign to it. Now there is one last way of declaring a struct that I want you to be aware of. So I'm going to delete these two lines that we've put together, and we're going to write out the third way of declaring a struct. So for this last way of doing it, I'm going to write var Alex is of type person. Now this declares a value of type person right here and assigns it to the variable Alex. Now that we've created Alex, Alex has absolutely no properties assigned to him yet. When you create a variable in Go and you do not actually assign any value to it, or you don't actually kind of pre-populate these different fields, Go assigns what is referred to as a zero value to each of these different fields inside the struct. Let's take a look at a diagram to get a better sense of what a zero value is. Okay, so depending on the different type of your field, you're going to end up with a slightly different zero value. So inside of our current struct, our person struct, we have two different strings. So when we say var Alex is type person, a struct is created and the first name and last name fields are automatically assigned the value of empty string. If we had in any type of numeric type inside of the struct, like an int or a float 64, they would have been automatically assigned a value of 0. And then if we had a field of type bool, or short for boolean of course, the field value would be automatically defaulted to be false. Now this is actually really important that you understand, because sometimes you might want to actually default these values to something else. And if you're coming from another language, you might be expecting that these field values will be assigned something like nil or undefined, especially if you're coming from, say, JavaScript or probably Ruby as well. So in Go, we don't really freely assign the value nil to just willy-nilly all over the place. Instead, we make use of these zero values. So if we were to go back over to our code editor right now and log out Alex and then run this program, we're going to see something kind of interesting. So I'll say go run main go, and you'll notice that we have essentially an empty struct. But in reality, the first name and last name are both defined, but their values are empty string. And so this log statement right here can actually be interpreted as empty string, because first name and last name are both empty string. Now, another way to really confirm that is to print out the struct in a slightly different fashion. So there's a different log or a different print statement that we can use to log out the struct and list out each field name and the value that is assigned to each one as well. So right underneath this print line statement, I'm going to add in format printf. Now we've seen printf previously very shortly once before, and we had said that we can use printf with kind of like a interpolation syntax, where we put in a little identifier that then gets filled in with an actual value. So I'm going to pass a string to this thing of % plus v, and then as a second argument to the function, I'm going to pass in Alex, like so. % plus v right here will print out all the different field names and their values from Alex. So let's save this and run it again and see what we get. So I'll run it again, and now we can see first name of what looks like nothing but is actually very truly empty string, and then last name of empty string as well. Okay, so that is the third way to declare a new struct in Go. You'll see this option right here used sometimes, especially if you want to get access to, or you want specifically to have those zero values in place. But in general, for a lot of the code that we are going to be writing, we're going to use that kind of property name : value syntax that we saw just a moment ago. Okay, so the last thing I want to look at in this section is how do we update the properties or the fields on a struct? Well, this is going to feel a lot like other languages that we might be used to. So underneath our declaration of Alex, we can say simply alex.firstname equals, and then the value that we want to assign. So we'll say Alex, maybe alex dot last name Anderson, like so. So now we can save this file, run our code again, and we get back to Alex Anderson, and here's the alternative way of printing out a struct right here, where we can very plainly see first name of Alex, last name of Anderson. So again, very common way of updating structs, dot syntax that you're probably used to in a variety of different languages already. Okay, so we've learned a little bit more about structs and how they work. Let's continue in the next section, and we're going to get a little bit more knowledge on some of the more complex uses of structs. So quick break, and I'll see you in just a minute.